For 3 weeks this summer, one man turned the biggest tournament in football into his personal highlight reel. He scored on his World Cup debut. He scored in the knockout rounds. And then, a few nights ago, he did something almost nobody saw coming. He knocked Brazil, the 5-time champions, out of the World Cup, with 2 goals in the space of 11 minutes. A country that had not even reached a World Cup since 1998 was suddenly in the quarterfinals for the first time in its history. By that point, he had scored 7 goals, level with Lionel Messi and Kylian Mbappe for the most at the entire tournament, and the whole planet was asking the same question. Who is this guy? Then tonight, in Miami, the fairy tale finally met its match. England ended Norway's run, 2-1 after extra time. For the first time in 14 games, the machine did not score. The dream was over. But here is the thing. Erling Haaland is only 25 years old. And whether tonight was heartbreak or just the beginning, one thing is already certain. Football has never really seen anything quite like him. So how did a boy from a tiny town in Norway become the most feared goalscorer on earth? This is the story of Erling Haaland. Erling Braut Haaland was born on the 21st of July in the year 2000 in Leeds, England. That might sound strange for a Norwegian icon, but there was a good reason. His father was playing football there at the time. His father, Alfie Haaland, was a professional footballer who played for clubs like Nottingham Forest, Leeds United, and Manchester City, and who represented Norway at the 1994 World Cup before injury brought his own career to an early end. His mother, Gry Merida, was no ordinary athlete either. She had been a national champion in the heptathlon, one of the most punishing events in all of track and field. In other words, Erling did not just grow up around sport. He was the product of 2 elite athletes in a household where competition was simply a way of life. So Erling was, quite literally, bred for sport. When he was 3, the family moved back to their roots, a small Norwegian town called Bryne, home to little more than 10,000 people. And from the moment he could walk, the boy was an athlete. He played handball, he played golf, he ran track, and he was good enough that some believed he could have made a career in other sports entirely. But football was always the one that mattered. And there is one story that says everything about what was coming. At the age of 5, he reportedly set a world record for his age group in the standing long jump. 5 years old, and already jumping further than any child his age on record. The explosive power that would one day terrify grown defenders was there from the very start. He joined his hometown club, Bryne, and the goals came in floods. As a teenager in the reserves, he scored 18 goals in 18 games. He made his senior debut just before his 16th birthday. He was raw. He was already growing toward the towering frame that would one day dwarf defenders, and he was clearly special. As a boy, he had idolized powerful forwards like Cristiano Ronaldo and Zlatan Ibrahimovic. Now he was quietly on his way to joining them. But almost nobody outside Norway knew his name yet. That was about to change in the most dramatic way imaginable. In 2017, a bigger Norwegian club came calling, Molde, and the manager there was a familiar face to football fans, a former Manchester United striker named Ole Gunnar Solskjaer. Under Solskjaer, Haaland transformed. He reportedly added around 15 kilograms of pure muscle. He learned how to time his runs, how to bully defenders, how to turn his freakish athleticism into goals. By his second season, he was Molde's top scorer and had been named the Breakthrough Player of the Year in Norwegian football. But the moment the world truly noticed him came with the Norway youth team. At the Under-20 World Cup in 2019, Norway played Honduras, and Erling Haaland scored 9 goals. 9 in a single match. It is a record that may never be broken. Norway won that game 12 goals to nothing, and almost every one of them came from a single, unstoppable teenager. Norway went out of that tournament in the group stage, and Haaland still walked away with the Golden Boot as its top scorer. Suddenly, every big club in Europe knew his name. He signed for Red Bull Salzburg in Austria, and there, he announced himself on the biggest club stage of all, the Champions League. On his Champions League debut, against the Belgian side Genk, he scored a hat-trick in the first half alone. Then he scored in his next game, and the game after that. He became the first teenager ever to score in 5 straight Champions League matches. In total, he scored 28 goals in just 22 games for Salzburg and helped them win the Austrian League and Cup. The whole continent was now watching a 19-year-old who simply would not stop scoring. A striker so cold in front of goal that people began calling him the smiling assassin. And the true giants of European football came running. In January 2020, he joined the German giants Borussia Dortmund, and he wasted absolutely no time. He came off the bench on his debut and scored a hat-trick in barely 20 minutes. It was the kind of introduction that belongs in a movie. At Dortmund, the goals kept coming at a rate that felt almost unfair, more than a goal a game for long stretches. He was big, he was fast, and he was ruthless. Defenders with twice his experience had no answer for him. He helped Dortmund win a German Cup, and he kept smashing records, becoming the fastest player ever to reach 50 Champions League goals. And it quickly became obvious that Dortmund, as huge as they are, could not hold on to him for long. In the summer of 2022, the best team in England came calling, Manchester City, managed by Pep Guardiola, and what happened next rewrote the record books. In his very first season in the Premier League, widely regarded as the toughest league in the world, Haaland scored 36 league goals. Nobody in the entire history of the competition had ever scored that many in a single season. Across all competitions, he scored 52. And it was not only about personal records. That season, Manchester City won everything: the league title, the domestic cup, and the biggest prize in European club football, the Champions League. It is called the treble, and only a tiny handful of clubs in history have ever achieved it. The awards poured in after that. He was named the best player in Europe. He won the Golden Boot as the continent's top scorer, and he would go on to win the Premier League's top scorer award in 3 of his first 4 seasons. He became the fastest player ever to reach 50, and then 100 Premier League goals. Manchester City believed in him so completely that they later signed him to the longest contract in the league's history. In a single season, Erling Haaland had gone from exciting young striker to the most feared number 9 on the planet. Opponents started to talk about him the way you talk about a force of nature, something you cannot really stop, only survive. He finished as runner-up for the Ballon d'Or, the award for the best player in the world. He had conquered club football, but there was one arena where all of his records counted for nothing. Because for all his club trophies, Erling Haaland had a problem that no amount of money or talent could solve on its own. His country. Norway is a footballing minnow, a nation of just over 5 million people, far better known for skiing and winter sports than for the beautiful game. When Haaland was growing up, Norway had not qualified for a World Cup since 1998. The best striker in the world, scoring for fun every single week for Manchester City. And yet, he could not get his national team to the sport's biggest party. It was the one thing missing. He had said openly that his biggest dream was not another Premier League record. It was to take Norway to a World Cup, to give his tiny country a moment on the global stage. He welcomed that weight rather than hiding from it. "I like the pressure," he once said. "I would put a lot of pressure on Erling Haaland if I were not Haaland myself." And he backed the words up with goals. He became Norway's all-time leading scorer, racking up more than 60 goals for his country at a rate of well over 1 a game, numbers almost unheard of in international football. And finally, after years of near misses, he did it. Norway qualified for the 2026 World Cup, their first in 28 years. For a whole generation of Norwegians who had never once seen their team at a World Cup, it felt like a miracle. Grown men who had spent their childhoods watching other nations play in the summer finally had a team of their own to follow. And the man who made it happen was determined to make it count. What came next would become one of the great stories of the entire tournament. When the 2026 World Cup kicked off, most of the attention was on the usual names: Messi, Ronaldo, Mbappe. Almost nobody expected the story of the tournament to be written by little Norway. But in their very first game, Haaland scored twice, and Norway beat Iraq. He was only getting started. There was a stumble along the way, a heavy defeat to France in the group stage that reminded everyone how far Norway still had to climb. But this team did not fold. They regrouped, and they kept coming. Norwegian fans brought a celebration called the Viking Row, thousands of them sweeping their arms as one, and it quickly became the defining image of the tournament. Their team, dragged forward by their talisman, just kept winning. Haaland scored a dramatic late winner to knock out the Ivory Coast, and then came the night that stunned the entire world. Against Brazil, the 5-time champions, Haaland struck twice in the final minutes to win it, 2-1. Norway were in the quarterfinals for the first time in their whole history, and with 7 goals, Haaland was now level at the very top of the scoring charts with Messi and Mbappe, 2 of the most famous players alive. He had scored 7 times in his first 4 World Cup matches, a scoring rate not seen since the great German striker Gerd Müller lit up the tournament back in 1970. It was not a one-man team, and Haaland was always the first to say so. Norway's veteran goalkeeper had produced save after save to keep them alive, including a crucial penalty stop against Brazil. But there was no question who the talisman was. There was even a small moment that summed him up perfectly. After scoring against Brazil, he began to rip off his shirt in celebration, then stopped himself, because a booking would have ruled him out of the next game. Even in the middle of pure euphoria, the machine was still thinking clearly. It was the performance of a superstar who had finally, fully arrived. Afterward, he admitted the win had brought him to tears. Those goals, he said, belonged to every child in Norway who now believed that anything was possible. Which brings us to tonight, the quarterfinal. Norway against England, one of the favorites to win the whole thing. For once, the goals would not come. England surrounded him, defending in numbers, and for the first time in 14 games, Erling Haaland was kept off the score sheet. No team had managed that in well over a year. A young English star named Jude Bellingham scored twice, the second deep into extra time, and England won, 2-1. Norway's incredible run was over. The Viking Storm had finally been calmed, just one step short of the semifinals, and yet it is hard to feel too sorry for Erling Haaland, because he is still only 25. This was his first ever World Cup, not his last. He dragged a nation that had waited nearly 30 years all the way to the last 8, gave his country a summer it will talk about for decades, and announced himself to a global audience as a genuine force of nature. Very few players have ever carried a whole country quite so far, quite so young. The greats of this game are often defined by the prizes they chase for years before finally lifting them. There is still a Ballon d'Or to win, and another World Cup on the horizon, when he will be closer to his prime than his end. For Haaland, the international story is only just beginning, and history suggests you should never bet against a man who seems to score whenever he pleases. So what makes Erling Haaland so special? It is not only the goals, though there are so very many of them. It is the sense that he was almost engineered for this exact purpose. The athletic parents, the small-town hunger, the relentless, almost robotic focus that never seems to waver. People call him a machine, and they mean it as the highest compliment. But tonight showed the human side too. A man carrying the hopes of an entire nation, falling just short. One of his old coaches once said something worth remembering. "Everyone calls him a machine," he said, "but it is more important to call him a human being, because a machine just produces, while a person feels the weight of it all and carries it anyway." From a 5-year-old breaking jumping records in a tiny Norwegian town, to standing shoulder to shoulder with Messi and Mbappe at a World Cup, the rise of Erling Haaland has been almost impossible to believe. The boy who once idolized the great strikers is now the one that millions of children copy in playgrounds around the world. And the frightening part, for every defender on earth, is that he is probably only just getting started. If you enjoyed this story, there is another deep dive into a footballing giant waiting for you on screen right now. Go give it a watch.